morning. Shishin Roshi is a Dharma successor of Taizan Maezumi Roshi. He's also a Zen priest. He's the president and co-spiritual leader of the Great Mountain Zen Center in Colorado. He is the author of two books, The Great Heart Way, which he and his wife, Shinko Perez Roshi, have developed as a way of practicing and opening the heart and opening to the unconscious. Just a wonderful practice they've developed early on. He's also the author of the Book of Equanimity, which is one of the treasures of our Zen school. It's a collection of koans that we use regularly here at our Zen Center in koan study. So I'm just delighted that Shishin Roshi is going to talk to us this morning about atonement. He's a dear friend and Dharma brother of mine. We practiced together. I've lost count, Shishin Roshi. It's, what is it, 50 years back in?
Yeah, almost 50 years. I was going to mention that. Yeah.
Lost count. This was a long time. It seems like another lifetime. But you're I'm so delighted that you're sharing your wisdom with us and compassion this morning. Happy to see you. And I'll let you, it's all yours, Shishin.
Okay. Well, thank you. Like Joshin Roshi said, I've known him for almost 50 years. It's several lifetimes ago when we were young and very enthusiastic. And now we're old and we still have some enthusiasm, I think. Still doing this after all these years. And of course, Jun Sensei, I've known for not quite as many lifetimes as I've known Joshin, but I've known her for quite a while too. And it's a pleasure to be here. And hello, Chicago. And I know with Zoom, your reach is much broader than Illinois. I'm sure there's people here from other states and maybe even other countries. It's been kind of a crazy year, hasn't it? I don't know if you're like me, you've probably been glued to your phone or computer or TV, seeing what outrageous thing is going to happen next, and it's almost like an addiction. And it's obvious that we live in a very divided country. I mean, I thought the election was over about 6 or 7 times, but it still keeps, has a life of its own, keeps going on. I guess maybe the 6th will be another occasion when we think it's over, but I guess it won't be till the 20th. But, people are always concerned about their own self-interest. And whether it's economic, racial, or one issue that concerns them, such as abortion, or whether they're xenophobic, but I'm a bit baffled why so many people can support a man who displays so much a lack of decency, honesty, and compassion. But the people who support him, they're our neighbors and friends. And so how do we all go forward together is one of the big questions. But right now we're in the midst of a number of crises, such as the pandemic and the economic slump. Eventually these crises will run their course. But there's a more serious crisis in my mind, which is the climate and ecological crisis. Every day species are disappearing, and wildfires and hurricanes of unprecedented proportions are becoming commonplace. And the temperature's rising and the ocean is becoming more acidic. And this crisis demands much more energy and resources than have been forthcoming. So one of the questions I want to bring up today and hopefully touch upon is what brings us peace and serenity in these troubling times? First, we need to recognize and accept that there is no security or certainty in this life. Pema Chodron said, if you're invested in security and certainty, you're on the wrong planet. For me, Zen practice is to learn how to live with uncertainty, which in the words of the first Zen Peacemaker tenet is to maintain the mind of not knowing. And there's a Zen expression that says there's not a square inch of ground upon which to stand. And the Diamond Sutra says that our fleeting life is like a tiny drop of dew or a bubble floating on a stream, like a flash of lightning in the summer cloud, or a flickering lamp, an illusion, a phantom, or a dream. Because of our attachment to certainty in the midst of uncertainty, we have the Gotha of Atonement. The Gotha of Atonement is a touchstone that brings us back to our purpose as Zen Buddhists. Before any significant Buddhist ceremony, we recite the Gotha of Atonement in order to purify ourselves and to make ourselves unconditioned. We can also use the Gotha at any transition point in our lives, such as right now. The Zen Peacemaker rendition of the Gotha goes like this. All my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born of body, speech, and mind, I now fully atone. So in the ultimate Buddhist sense, twisted karma is created when we're not one with the three treasures of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. It's when we fragment ourselves. Twisted karma is a false sense of separation, which means any duality at all. To atone means to unify. One of the purposes of Zen is to realize the oneness of life. That's the intent of reciting the Gotha of Atonement. In English, it makes sense. Atone, at one, atonement, to become one. Doesn't make so much sense in Spanish, but it does in English. But that's what the intent is. And we chant this Gotha of Atonement in the precept ceremony. Some of you have received the precepts, the Buddhist precepts, the 16 Bodhisattva Precepts. And the first of the pure precepts is to cease doing evil. And whenever we create separation or fragment the self, that's what doing evil is. And to maintain the mind of not knowing is to uphold this precept. There's nothing wrong with knowledge. You know, I have a tremendous amount of education. And when I first started doing Zazen, my mind was so active, it was a real challenge to keep it quiet. So we use knowledge for all kinds of things. But usually, our mind creates something outside ourselves in order to protect or aggrandize ourselves. So we say not knowing is most intimate. And when we know something, such as you're separate from me, there's the person who knows it and what's known, and then the thing that's known. And we create a fragmented self, which is the shadow side of our being. And it's the illusion that we're separate from the Buddha. And all that that fragment itself can do is rebel. Because the fragment itself is terrified of the unknown, and with good reason. See, the fragment itself does not want to be made whole, complete, because what happens when that happens? In the famous words of Dogen, he said, to study Zen is to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self. And the fragment itself does not want to be forgotten. It wants to hold on. I'll talk more about this in just a minute, but Master Hakuin, famous 18th century Japanese master, said that one of the biggest barriers to realizing our true selves is our habit-ridden consciousness. It's our habits that we hold on to. So the road to the true self is not for the weak of heart and the casual meditator. Now, people come to meditation for all kinds of reasons, and they're all valid. Some people come just to feel more calm, to feel more grounded, which is perfect. Some people come because they want to really connect with their true self. And if you want to do that, and you're just curious about it, you'll be quickly disappointed. There has to be a deep longing in your heart and a fire burning in your gut. You must be willing to plunge into the abyss of the unknown. And you must be willing to surrender control to something larger than your fragmented ego. When we let go of these false views, the enlightened life opens up. And we realize that we're not separate from everyone else. It's our constant preoccupation to foster and protect this false view of self. It's an unthinking habit that most of us would be unlikely to question or explain. The Buddha taught that all of our suffering is associated with this preoccupation. All loss, all gain, pleasure and pain arise because we identify so closely with this vague feeling of a self-image that we cling to. We're so emotionally attached and involved with this self that we take it for granted. When Maezumi Roshi asked me to start teaching as an assistant teacher sometime in the early 1980s, I had been taught and read that you don't bring personal issues into the interview room or the Doksan room with the teacher. You just bring in your practice, whether issues are relating to your practice or if you're doing koans relating to your koan practice. And when I started teaching, all people brought into me were personal, emotional issues. That's all they brought in. And I was kind of stunned. And I went to Bernie Glassman, who was Maezumi Roshi's senior student and his first successor. And I said, Bernie, what's going on? And Bernie said, well, that's what's on their mind. That's what's going on when they sit their practice. This is what they're working through. And then I realized that the traditional monastic priestly way of training doesn't always translate into the new country where the Buddhism is taking root, because a lot of the people practicing are lay people. They have jobs, they have families, and they have other issues. And so Joshin mentioned that Roshi Shinko and I wrote this book called The Great Heart Way. We spent 10 years looking at how to deal with emotional, personal issues through meditation. And I mentioned that Hakuin said that the most difficult part of our practice to let go of is our habit-ridden consciousness. We do so many things without even questioning them. And when we sit meditation, I know that at the Zen Life Meditation Center, you learn mindfulness practice, just being attentive, just being aware. Notice how many things we do automatically without even noticing them. And that's part of our practice, is just to be aware of what we're doing. You know, and as a scientist, which was my training, you believe you can't change the past. But you know what we can change is our attitude. And when we change our attitude, our karma even changes. And the past is no longer what we believed it to be. So in a way, we can transform our past karma through our attentiveness, our meditation, through atonement. But karma works in strange and mysterious ways. I heard a story about this nerdy-looking guy who was sitting in a bar, staring at his glass, and a bully walks in and grabs the glass and drinks it down in one gulp. And then he says, "What are you going to do about that, wimp?" And the nerd starts to cry, and the bully glares at him and says, "What's wrong with you?" And the nerd blubbers, "This morning I got fired from my job. And when I went home, I found my wife in bed with my best friend. As I was leaving the house, my dog bit me in the leg. And as I was driving away, I wasn't paying attention. And I ran into another car and totaled my car right in front of this bar. So I came in here and decided to kill myself. I put poison in my drink and was contemplating drinking it. But enough of me. How's your day?" So, the moral of the story is, don't be a bully. Look at what your habits are, because greed, hatred, and delusion arise when we feel inadequate in some way. When we atone, we look at the greed, hatred, and delusion that we've created. But when we feel inadequate, we need something to feel complete or successful, or to gain the admiration of our peers. We don't recognize our fragmented self. We don't recognize our authentic self, our unfragmented self. We need something to feel good about ourselves. So it's always good to ask ourselves, what am I lacking right now? At this very moment. Not only what am I lacking, but what am I holding on to? When the Buddha was asked what he had gained from all of his years of meditation and teaching, he said, "I haven't gained anything, but I've let go of many things." So we each have a wish-fulfilling jewel within us, and our practice is to reveal that jewel. Often we're told to remember to be grateful for blessings and good fortune. But Buddhism teaches us to be grateful, period. Gratitude is to be cultivated as a habit or attitude of mind, and not be dependent upon conditions. Gratitude is an antidote to greed. Greed often comes from a sense of not having enough, or at least not having as much as everyone else has. Gratitude assures us that what we have is enough. Greed and gratitude cannot peacefully coexist, it seems. The same goes for jealousy, regret, resentment, and many other negative emotions. A lack of gratitude means that we're not paying attention and taking existence for granted. Another Zen friend of mine, Norman Zoketsu Fisher Roshi, said, we take existence for granted. We take it as a given, and then we complain that it isn't working out as we want it to. But why should we be here in the first place? Why should we exist at all? To cultivate a mind of gratitude. The most important element is maintaining daily practice, whether chanting or meditation, and remember to be grateful for the practice. Moment to moment, mindfulness and gratitude go hand in hand. A good way to strengthen mindfulness is to set aside some time every day to fully engage in mindfulness. Let yourself sit quietly and at ease. Allow your body to be relaxed and open your breath naturally. Your heart, easy. Begin the practice of gratitude by feeling how year after year you've been cared for. Now, let yourself begin to acknowledge all that has supported you in this life. With gratitude, I remember the people, animals, insects, creatures of the sky and sea, air and water, fire and earth, all whose joyful exertion blesses my life every day. With gratitude, I remember the care and labor of 1,000 generations of elders and ancestors who came before me. I offer my gratitude to the blessings of this earth that I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the measure of health I've been given. I offer my gratitude for my family and friends I've been given. I offer my gratitude for the community I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the teachings and lessons I have been given. I offer my gratitude for the life I have been given. Just as we are grateful for our blessings, so we can be grateful for the blessings of others. And extend this mind to others to help heal the divisions in our country. Just recently, I read an article in an online blog about the Dalai Lama, who was visiting in New Mexico. And he wanted, somebody told him about skiing. He hadn't seen skiing. He wanted to go to a ski slope. And it's a funny story about he wanted to go up with his monks. His entourage had about 6 monks. And they wanted to go up the lifts to the top. And of course, they didn't know how to get on and off the list. And that was a funny story, but skiers plowing into them, but fortunately no one got hurt. But after he was so thrilled, to be up on the mountains, reminded him of Tibet, up on the top of the ski slopes. But they went for a snack, and there was this waitress, and the blogger said that the Dalai Lama gave his full attention to everybody when he was talking to them. He didn't care what station they were in life, whether they were a head of state or a waitress in a small cafe in a ski resort. And the waitress, after serving him, said to him, "What is the meaning of life? Sir, if you would please answer for me, what's the meaning of life?" And she sat down and looked at him, and he looked her in the eye and he said, "Happiness. Happiness is the meaning of life." But that's not the whole story. How do you find happiness? That's the challenging part. Do you find happiness by collecting material objects? Once, when my daughter was, she was about in the second grade, I think, and she was quite an acquisitive kid. They had Beanie Babies at that time, and she had to have all the Beanie Babies, and of course they would keep coming out with new ones, and she would have to have this collection that kept growing and growing. And she had to do a little experiment in her science class, and I said, here's a suggestion I have for you. When you get a new Beanie Baby, why don't you make a graph of how much you play with it each day. And the first day you get it, you'll play with it maybe 2 hours. And then the second day, maybe it's an hour. And the third day, maybe half an hour. And then the fourth day, 10 minutes. And so she graphed this, and sure enough, every new thing she got, she played with a lot at first, and then it went down. And then we had to come, what was the hypothesis? What was the theory here? And of course, I wanted her to see that she get these things and then she gets tired of them. And so maybe, they aren't really fulfilling her. But of course, her conclusion was that she always needs new things in order to be happy. But now she's in her 30s, so I think she's learned a little bit. She has kids of her own, so she might have learned that lesson. So what brings happiness? So that's an important question, because as one of the main teachings of the Buddha is that everything's impermanent. And if we try to find our happiness on things that are permanent, we're going to be disappointed. And if we do try to find happiness by aggrandizing this ephemeral sense of self, we're going to be disappointed. So of course, the Dalai Lama said, you find happiness by bringing happiness to others. If you're happy yourself, if you embody happiness. So that we chant the 4 vows a little differently this morning. I thought I heard the awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. So if you embody happiness, that's the meaning of life. And many people say they find happiness in serving others, and that's the Bodhisattva vow. That's what we're chanting after each meditation period, is how to serve. So how can we really serve? We have to let go of the self. And from my perspective, the healing that must take place in our country depends upon the realization of no self, no fixed self. That doesn't mean it's nothing. That means that it's boundless. When we realize no self, we experience the unity of life. We also experience the interconnectedness of life. When we feel connected to everyone else, we would not think of causing them harm. A natural consequence of the experience of no self is an awareness that everyone is connected and that what we do affects everyone else. Unconditional compassion arises from one's true self, which is devoid of self-grasping, ego-grasping, or habit-ridden consciousness. It's devoid of self and essence. Then it's not limited. The true self is boundless and contains everything. If it contains everything, then nothing can defile it. We can create unhealthy or healthy karma with our body, mouth, and thought. If we look at the 10 great precepts of the 16 Bodhisattva Precepts, we see they can be divided into categories according to whether they're created by the body, mouth, or thought. At a simple level, the first one is to honor life and not kill. But at a simple level, killing is a physical thing, and it's done with the body. And lying is done through words. But we can kill someone's spirit by constantly criticizing him or her and telling him or her that they're no good. Some of you have been deeply injured by parents or teachers who verbally abused you. And we can lie with the whole body. Some of you might be quite good at discerning body language. And we're constantly elevating ourselves and putting down others in our mind. I remember years ago when he was president, Jimmy Carter confessed to having unchaste thoughts. And I thought, wow, that was incredible. When we chant all of the twisted karma created by my mind, in my mind. But of course, our Zen motto is, it's not what you think. Yet thoughts can create karma, precisely because it's not what you think. Lao Tzu said, be careful with your thoughts. They become your words. Be careful with your words. They become your actions. Be careful with your actions. They become your habits. Be careful with your habits. They become your character. Be careful with your character. It becomes your destiny. So be careful with your thoughts. It can determine the whole course of your life. And of course, that again is where your meditation and your mindfulness comes in. Just notice. Notice when you're getting off course. But also the theme of my talk is atonement, and I want to emphasize that atonement is not guilt, but it's acknowledging that we are not separate from all that is. That maybe we have gone off course, but we have to correct that course. The best way to atone is to heal the fragmented self, to reveal yourself as one. Then the three poisons transform into the three wisdoms. Or the four poisons transform into four wisdoms, or the five poisons transform into five wisdoms. Since one has no reference, we atone for our twisted karma. Now that the election is over, but the bickering is still going on, when we finally reach the end of this twisted karmic path, I hope we can remember the words of Nelson Mandela, who went through much twisted karma himself, spending many years in prison fighting apartheid in South Africa. But when he became the leader of South Africa after being freed from prison, he said, "Our human compassion binds us the one to the other, not in pity or patronizingly, but as human beings who have learned how to turn our common suffering into hope for the future." So in a way, the Gotha of Atonement is purifying ourselves so that we can move forward one step at a time into the future. And as Nelson Mandela said, let us all go forward with open hearts, open minds, and let's appreciate and take care of each other. And thank you for listening. And I don't know how you want to do it, but if anybody wants to comment or ask any questions, I think we still have some time.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, this is Yvette Washington. I just want to say to you, sir, Gerry Shishin Wick, Roshi, Ph.D., it's an honor to speak with you. I'm currently reading a book by Taizan Maezumi Roshi.
Yeah.
It's called, what is it? Appreciate Your Life, I think it is. Appreciate something.
Appreciate your life, yes.
Yes. And when I saw that you were going to be speaking today, I made sure that I was here to hear you speak, because I know who I read in the message about today that he was your instructor, your teacher. And so it's an honor to be here. And I like the synchronicity of this, all of this.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Roshi, when you told me that you do a talk about atonement, I wondered to myself, is he going to talk about socially engaged Buddhism? And of course, you certainly did. And I appreciate that. But I wonder if you might say something about what more you think we can do in terms of, I mean, you certainly, I think, appropriately commented on our current political state of affairs. We don't have to talk about that, but ecology is certainly a critical area for socially engaged Buddhism. You want to say anything more about that with respect to and carry that from atonement?
Yeah. Well, one of my neighbors here in Colorado is David Loy, who's actually a Roshi in the Sambo Kyodan lineage, which he's a relative of ours, because one of Maezumi Roshi's teacher, Yasutani Roshi, is in that same lineage. He wrote a book called Eco-Dharma, and he's written other books talking about institutional three poisons, institutional greed and hatred and delusion, which have given rise to many of the inequities which we experience in our country, not only economically, but racially. And as Buddhists, how can we correct it? And I've talked with David many, many times, and he and some other people here started the Rocky Mountain Eco-Dharma Retreat Center. And we've had retreats there, and we've started activities, and a lot of it right now is education. But I think that we need to, as individuals, just be open and do a lot more, for me, listening than talking. For example, Shinko and I have a small farm in rural Colorado, and it's Trump country. We're surrounded by many Trump followers, and they're wonderful people. I really appreciate them as neighbors. And a few months ago, before the pandemic, actually, we're kind of isolated now, but one of my neighbors said that all Muslims are terrorists. And instead of saying, oh, no, you're wrong, I said, really? Where did you learn that? Where did you hear that? And he didn't know what to say, but I just want to plant seeds of doubt when they say things like that, which I know not only aren't true, but they aren't very healthy attitudes to have. And as I'm not a big organizer, I just deal with people, in small groups. I mean, you have quite a good turnout today. But I think that if we share our heart, our and I mentioned, our happiness, our joy, our caring, even with those who disagree with us, I think that will affect change. And I think if you look on the internet, you'll find stories of Black Lives Matter people going to white supremacist rallies and speaking their heart and making connections, and things change. So I think that I don't know what more to say as far as a grand solution, but I just think it has to happen individually, one on each person. And the ecological crisis, I mean, there's things that we can do as individuals, but a lot of it is just people have to be aware. And one of the biggest problems is not feeling the connection with the earth, that the earth is something to pillage. And Shinko gave a talk here a couple months ago about the feminist point of view, the sacred feminist point of view. And a lot of the patriarchal attitudes are domination, whereas the feminist perspective, is to take care of things, to take care of the earth. And of course, the original inhabitants, the indigenous people here knew that very well, and we can start learning from them. Yeah. I could go on and on, but maybe that's enough.
Hi, thank you so much for your wonderful talk, Gerry. And I wanted to say how I enjoyed reading the book, The Great Heart Way, that you co-authored with Shinko. It was recommended to me by my teacher, Genro, gone from New York. And that was the very first book he suggested we read. He said, if you read anything about Zen, read this book.
Well, really?
And yeah. So thank you very much for that and for your talk. And I really enjoyed your bar joke. It was really made me laugh out loud. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Genro, I've known Genro almost 50 years too. I didn't know he was recommending my book. That's good to know. Thank you. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Thank you for this morning. You've given me a lot to think about, all of us. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the difference with atonement and guilt, because I generally associate atonement with guilt.
Yeah. That's an interesting question, because like I mentioned, Roshi Shinko is Spanish, and we've translated a lot of things for our Spanish Sangha, and Atonement was a tough one, because it has elements of renunciation in it. But I don't know what the etymology is in the original languages. Maybe somebody here might know. But guilt doesn't serve any useful purpose. I think that we need to look at what guilt is in our body. When we feel guilty, we need to look and see what energies it arises in our bodies due to our feelings of guilt. And one of the principles, or not principles, but one of the teachings of the Great Heart Way is to just feel the energy without judging it. And guilt is a judgment. It's a judgment that we did something that was inadequate, inappropriate, or unsuitable. And if we just stay present with the feelings in our body, we can often release that. And atonement, at least the way that we use it in this way, is to look at where we're creating gaps or separation in our life because of our actions and our words and our thoughts. And so it's not a way of criticizing ourselves, but it's like when you do the dishes, you use them and they become dirty, and then you wash them and you put them away. So it's just a way of recognizing and saying, well, this is something I've been doing, and now I'm going to atone for it, which means that I'm going to try to do better next time. Not that I'm a bad person for what I've done. And I think that's where guilt comes in. Our feelings of guilt don't make us good or bad. They're just feelings. It's the judgments that we put on top of it. We have to be careful about. So we have all kinds of stories in our mind, that are different from what's actually the truth of what's going on with us. And so that's part of what meditation is about, is to learn to distinguish between our stories, which are projections, and what's really going on. I saw this funny meme on the internet that said, I know that worrying works. I worry all the time, and I know that it's effective because 99% of the things I worry about never happen. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi,
Hi.
I have something to say about the word atonement.
Yes.
Coming from a Catholic background myself, I would like to say that, the word atonement is it's not like someone is standing over you saying, oh, you did this and you better apologize, or you better say you're sorry, or whatever. It's like you have the power, atone for your sins. That's the sense of the word that I got when I was growing up, atone for your sins.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and some of you who are Jewish know that Yom Kippur is a day of atonement, and I was raised in a Jewish family, and I had a hard time separating it from guilt, and it wasn't until I started practicing Zen that I was able to then see it as my own responsibility to unify my life, and I think that's what Yvette just said too.
And then also in the Catholic religion, we do get a sense of guilt, though, from that whole confessional thing that you begin to do when you're a child. You have to go to confession. Well, you're just a little kid, really. What have you done? And so I think that a Catholic person, I did have to learn this, that sometimes I feel guilty and I haven't even done anything.
You ought to take a look at Roshi Shinko's book. It's called The Zen Priestess and the Snake. She was raised Catholic in a Latin country and forced to go to mass and confession. And she talks about confession in there. It's very entertaining, kind of like what you're saying.
Thank you. I will read that.
I also wanted to ask you a question because I believe that oftentimes people are confusing compensation with atonement. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
What does compensation mean to you?
In terms of, I have insulted somebody today, and then tomorrow I will give them a small gift instead of apologizing. So therefore I will compensate instead of atoning for it.
Okay, so thank you. I mentioned that in the precepts that it's important to maintain the mind of not knowing. So rather than, it's not a question of compensating, it's a question of becoming unconditioned, so that when we meet that person again, we don't carry the karmic baggage with us that from the original encounter, but that we're open to whatever is going to transpire. And I think that relates back to what Shishin was asking about our being so divided politically. If we maintain the mind of not knowing when we meet with people who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum, then we're more open to interacting with them instead of following our habit-ridden consciousness. So how to maintain the mind of not knowing, of being open, that's the challenge. And that's an important part of our practice, is to learn how to constantly step into the unknown. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Shishin Roshi, so great to have you here. And I really appreciate what you said about embodying the feelings, of guilt, for example. Because I always thought like that atonement, being at one with the guilt, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the feeling. And so the word embody just clarified it, made it even more specific as to how you can work with it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Good to see you.
Good morning, Roshi. Good morning, Sangha.
Good morning.
Good morning, Sensei and Roshi. Good to see you back at the Sangha with us. And the question I have is about ancestors and still being of my mother, my nana, my great-grandmother, my family, and this, intergenerational grief and guilt. And I too was raised in a Jewish home, and this idea of the 300-year resentment and guilt that follows me as a woman, and how just this idea of how do I tolerate those feelings that come up that are ancestral, that are some of the pain that comes up intergenerationally, and my responsibility to hold that. That's just what came to mind.
Yeah.
Large question, but
Thank you. Yeah, that's come up before, that, guilt is one thing that's passed through generation. Abusive behavior is another thing that's passed through. So how do we manage to end that habit, you know. So the interesting thing is that if each one of us can learn to just stay present with a feeling of whether it's guilt or resentment from being abused, and learn how to just experience with our body, and there's ways to heal it that we in the Great Heart Way we talk about. There's ways to heal wounds from our childhood. We can learn to do that. It not only frees us, but it can free our ancestors too. Just tell it's not a deep story, but my mother was very overbearing and overly protective, and as a young teenager, I just learned to tune her out. And I have 3 siblings, and they all tuned her out too. And I will credit my Zen practice of learning how to stay present. I just started listening to her when she was in my presence. And I realized she actually had some interesting things to say if I just listened to her. And I just paid her attention. And just the fact that I paid her attention changed her behavior. And she was no longer as clinging and overbearing and frightened. So I think that just by taking care of that in ourselves, even though it's gone on from generation to generation, we can break that cycle, you know, by our own awareness, our own attentiveness, and our own courage to do that. So it certainly is possible. But and also remember that you don't have we do take on the suffering of others as bodhisattvas, but we don't have to let that overwhelm us in the sense that we have to solve all the problems. We just have to be present. And in the Zen Peacemakers, of which I'm a member, and I think I know that you guys members of the Zen, I think you are too, yeah. The tenets are to not knowing, and then to bear witness. And that's what I did with my mother. I just bore witness to her. And then the action that will occur to you out of not knowing and bearing witness will be obvious what needs to be done about it. And just being present with your parents, who it might, like I did, you know, could be helpful. So it's up to each one of us. You know, like the Dalai Lama said, you have to embody happiness. Okay, well, thank you.
Shishin Roshi, I want to thank you so much for sharing the Dharma with us this morning. It's been, it's a wonderful way to start the new year, actually, hearing your talk this morning. And you've given everyone, I think you've given us a lot to think about in terms of our own practice. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, and it's great to see you again. Everybody be safe, be well, and take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Roshi.
Thank you. You too, be well.
Bye, everyone. Blessings on the new year.
Yes, Happy New Year. Thank you, Shishin Roshi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roshi.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nothing.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Yvette.
Bye. Take care.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.